Hello, hello. Hello, hello. Okay, Kelly Alcoholic. Our main speaker will share her experience, strength, and hope with us. Please join me in welcoming Tina from Glendora.
Hi everyone, I'm Tina. I'm an alcoholic.
If you like another bottle of water, there's one right here.
Oh, thank you so much. Okay, I'm here to tell you what it was like, what happened, and what it's like now. I love being sober, honestly, today. I was born into the fumes of alcoholism and drug abuse. I was, by the time I was 18 months old, I was already a ward of the state. I was institutionalized for 9 years. I was emancipated by the court when I was about 11 years old because I was completely and utterly out of control. So when I say I was born into the fumes of alcoholism and drug abuse, what happened was I met my father one time. I met my father when I was like 20 or 21 years old, and he said to me, "Please, please, never call me again," you know. And he said, and I respect him, you know, because I didn't have to walk in his shoes, and I can respect a man for whatever decision he makes, whether it's for me or against me, so long as he follows through with it. And so I remember that at that time, I wanted to tell all my life, you know, because in the same respect, I respected my mother. My mom was a pharmaceutical dope fiend with occasional heroin alcohol problem. My mom was also a self-mutilating epileptic. And my mom was one of the greatest people I ever met on the face of the earth. I loved her. I respected her. She was there, but not all there. You know, she wasn't hiding, and that's respectable. I had always known who my mother was. As sick as she was there. She was present when she could be. And so this caused me and my twin sister, which I very rarely ever even like acknowledge, you know, because I'm like, I mean, don't you know the whole world revolves around me, you know? And I feel like kind of like a singular person in the respect that I'm an individual human. But this whole time I had a blessing, you know, that I had my sister with me. And it kind of floors me today that two people can grow up with the same identical set of circumstance, and yet our perception and the impact is completely different. And so I do acknowledge that I had a blessing. I had my sister the whole time. But when I was in this circumstance that we were born into, that I was born into, this caused me to become a ward of the state when I was 18 months old, and that's why I stayed institutionalized. I still feel like I'm institutionalized in the way that if it gets too hard out here, you know what I mean, I'll just catch a case, and then I'll just, you know, I know not normal people don't think that way, but anyway, I'm not really normal. And so when I was in the orphanage, I spent a lot of time in different orphanages, Holly Grove, Hillsides, in different foster care situations. You know, I had to become this chameleon, you know, where like a rare butterfly, you know, where you kind of like got to fit in and stuff. And so when I was a tiny little kid, in Holly Grove, I remember being so small that it was before I went to primary school. I would go with the house parent by the hand, and they would take me to collect the other children from primary school. And so when I was really in that age, I already had difficulty, and I had emotional difficulty at that time. I was I was full of fear, but I wasn't willing to cop to it. I couldn't really articulate it that I had fear, I just thought we were all on the same playing field, and I had a lot of, I got like a 5 head, this is a big brain in here. Anyway. And so, I'm trying to run the show, and I'm like, I'm not even like, I don't know, I'm not even 5 years old yet. And so I would run this game on the house parents. And the way the game went was I would lose control of myself. They would sit down in a chair and they would face my back to their front and they would wrap their legs around me and they would wrap their arms around me until I ceased fighting. And the game was, I just wanted somebody to hold me. But I was too full of fear to walk up to a complete stranger and say, will you hold me? I didn't want anybody close enough to me to either hurt me or leave me. That was my responsibility, And so when they couldn't appease me by the way I like to run the game, they would actually throw me in a padded cell. And in retrospect, that's where I met the God of my understanding. I only knew that because you were safe and I was safe. And I met a peace that surpassed understanding in that little tiny little padded cell with that little tiny little window. I wasn't crazy, not yet anyway, but I wasn't going to like flail myself against the wall or anything, but I just felt a calm peace in that room when I was there, with my higher power. And so you could usually find me in the orphanage. I was really a super inquisitive kid. So you could like find me. I was like underneath the kitchen sink and I would be playing with the chemicals and I would be mixing this, mixing that, and poof, and then the lights would go out and I'd be passed out on the kitchen floor with the ketchup sandwich. And and that was just kind of the kind of kid I was. And then this was in the late 60s, early 70s. I would go on home visits, and I would really run a guilt trip on my mother. And it was like the hippie era, so I caught this fascination with this stash box and this on the living room table. And then I had this little blue rolling machine with these papers, and I thought I was going to be a real good kid, and I was going to line it up and everything. And like in my family, it really wasn't a big deal, I would, one for you, one for me, two for me, one for you, do like that. And then I would take it back to the orphanage. And I remember even going to this other orphanage, and I was a little bit older, and they were like, do you smoke? And I was thinking, I know what I smoke. What do you smoke? I was only at that time probably 2nd grade, and I was like, smoke? Yeah, like smoke what, right? Anyway, what do you all smoke is what I said, and they said cigarettes. And so I'm like, well, no, I'm too young. I'm just a kid, why am I smoking cigarettes? But I had already been smoking other things, and I wasn't gonna reveal myself to these youngsters, and so I just kind of kept it to myself, and of course I didn't want to get my mother in trouble, and she didn't know anyway, and so in my family, they were like, as time had passed, and I was getting a little bit older, they would tell me like, hey kid, you need to slow down. And I'd go, there ain't no way on God's earth I'm gonna end up where you are. Being that my mom was a pharmaceutical drug addict with occasional heroin alcohol problem. I mean, my mom was coming, the people my mom hung out with were coming right after 6 o'clock with a gallon of vodka. The woman's hair was out to here, no teeth in her mouth, and not to offend anybody with no teeth in their mouth, but I'm just saying, like, I was like, I had a serious contempt for alcohol, and they would say, hey, one time my mom said, hey kid, go light this, and I went to the stove and I was trying to light it, and then it like lit up the side and popped and everything. Anyway, anyway, she was a little bit upset that her joint got messed up. And then, so the next time I was trying to be a good kid, and it really, like I said, it wasn't like a big deal in my family. If you imagine like in a Hispanic family, if everybody's getting loose and the kids are running around and they give them a little cerveza, then everybody's quiet, calm and everything. But they just said, hey, don't go down the wrong road. And at one time, I became my mom's drug runner because she would say, give the money to the kid. The kid always comes back with the right stuff. And if I got caught, I would just run or throw it out or, not cop to it anyway. And so I didn't think I had, I never thought I didn't even have a drink until later on. And so, and they were right. They would say, you know what, it's a gateway. And they were right, I had to come to the end of my own experience. And the way that happened was, I was 19 years old and I couldn't find my way to MacArthur Park. And today I can't see my way back there. And what happened was I lost my contempt for alcohol because I met him. This guy was going to be my higher power, and he took me out from running the streets of East Hollywood to a farm in Minnesota, and it was right in Newport, Minnesota. It was, I could have ran the game one more time, but I was so sick and tired of being sick and tired, I had like the monkey off my back, but the circus was still in town. It was right about here going, yep, 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 yep. And I couldn't turn this thing off. So I lost my whole contempt for alcohol, and I went down to the Circle K and I scored some booze, and it worked. And it worked for quite some time. And so I had to, and I could have, like I said, I had to come to the end of my own experience. And the way it happened for me is my mom did a lot of stints in a lot of different insane asylums. We used to call it her vacation stay. Every Olive View and Branch and Vista. I remember when I was like 4 feet tall, in the Metropolitan State Hospital, the walls were pale green with the dark green trim. And you know what? Love shows up. It doesn't matter, where you are. Love will show up. And you know what? One of my foster mothers took me down to the LA County Hospital, to the psych ward, to visit my mom. Like I said, I had always known her. And I mean, Camarillo, just all different kinds of places and different kinds of experiences. And then yet somebody was doing the right thing, and somebody went in to the institution, to the insane asylum, and shared a message of hope with my mother. And in turn, my mother came out of her vacation stay, and she took my sister by the hand, and she said, those people sound like you. And she brought her in to Alcoholics Anonymous. And my mom could give it away, but my mom couldn't keep it. And then I got a call on Valentine's Day, 1999, and they found the body of my mother. My mom died day 0. It looked like she might have had her own hand in it, but it was her business, not my business. And so, I like Bill in his story, when his friend came to him, he's like, my booze is going to last a lot longer than his ranting, when the guy goes, I got religion, right? Anyway, I had the audacity that day. My sister at that time, I was always running on theories, you know what I mean? That if these people had gotten help, I would have been okay. I'm not the one with the problem. Maybe I'm a dope fiend, but I'm definitely, alcohol at that point was the solution, you know what I mean? And so my mom passed away, and I was devastated. And And I know it devastated my sister as well. But you know what? Misery loves company, because my sister had 3 years at that time. And then I had the audacity to approach my sister with this idea that, you know what? Is it time? And my sister said, no. She hit me on the back and she goes, finish up, because she had a better idea. We were going to the Tropical Cafe on Sunset and Silver Lake. She had started that meeting back in the 90s, and she had a better idea. And I remember going to that meeting that day, and I had a truckload of resentment. I needed 12 strong men to help me tote that through the door. And the audacity of these people, I remember the topic was gratitude. And I'm like, how about if I throw up all over you all, and then you can tell me how grateful you are? And then I just became some AA terrorist, you know? I swear I was wet for 5 years, and these people never told me, don't come here no more. They always go, keep coming back. And I thought my perception was so far off. I thought they were jeering at me. You know, I would be like so rude and nasty. And I was like, let me get out of here before I marinate something in your parking lot, you know? Or I would say something like, I resent the alcoholic. And I would like stagger back down to my seat. And then I don't know why they had these, like, they had 10-minute chips, you know? And I know it was from probably Nicotine Anonymous, you know? But they had all these 10-minute chips and around, and then one day they were all these 10-minute chips were sitting in front of me, and I was like, damn, I could do this for 10 minutes at a time, you know? And so but I had, you know, and AA loved me enough, you know. They told me to come back. My people told me, don't come here no more, we're calling the police. So when you guys said, hey, keep coming back, and that was the best I could do. So, you know, if you could stop. If you can't stop and they tell you to keep coming back, you just keep coming back. In the meantime, you know, you're willing to become willing. You know, I just didn't know the way. And so I kept on coming back, and my sister had gotten 5 years by the time I surrendered. It was about 18 months after my mom had passed away. I was able to make a surrender, and it happened in some way far out way that it was me and one policeman. It was strange to me, you know, because me and the police, I don't have any diplomacy. I hardly have any diplomacy today, you know, when it comes to the police. But anyway, so it was me and one policeman. And then, you know, the guy, my higher power, right, ended up becoming my husband. We have 3 children, you know. I mean, this was a long kind of road, you know. And I remember when I met my husband, he's like, do you do drugs, you know, because he was like a slinger, or I don't know what you call it today, like a pusher. Or whatever. Anyway, he was a money man. So I remember him asking me, hey, do you do drugs? And I was like, occasionally, you know, like, you know, but I mean, Tuesday's an occasion, you know. So, and you know what, if you had and I was able to, from that farm in Minnesota, I was able to stop using anything else. I was actual primo. I fancied myself a primo queen, if anybody knows what that is. But this is Alcoholics Anonymous. So, you know, I just switched. I lost my whole contempt for alcohol, and I just switched. And so by the time I surrendered, it happened in the strangest kind of way. It was me and one policeman. My husband had thrown all my stuff out on the street one more time, and I was living on my sister's living room floor in East Hollywood on Griffith Park Boulevard in Los Feliz, and I didn't have a problem. I didn't have any problem. I was living on her living room floor with her dog named Eros, you know. And I had to somehow come to the end of my own experience. And that's what Alcoholics Anonymous did for me. They loved me. I feared that which conquers fear. And it was all about love. And they loved me until I could make a surrender. They allowed me the dignity to come to the end of my own experience. And they told me, keep coming back. And that was the best that I could do. And so I remember going from Glendora. I was living in Glendora, and nobody in my direct family, my children, my husband, they never saw a drink in my hand. So they didn't know what the problem is, Yeah, they don't know what the problem is. I mean, even today, you know, after this many years of sobriety, my date is 5/5/2000, and they didn't know anything. Even my kids today, when I say, "Hey, it's my sobriety date," you know, or I say it's my birthday, and they're like, it's not your birthday. And then I go, yeah, it is, you know. And then they go, oh, good job, Mom, you know, like and then they say, we don't think you're alcoholic. And I'm like, hey, that's not for you to decide, you know. And then I say, hey, can we agree it's not advisable to mix booze with crazy? And they're like, Mom, you got a point there, you know, because if you don't know how crazy I am, and then, you know, you put a little gasoline on it, ooh, wow. And so I did. It was I got a call from him that day, and he said, he's a literal person. He's a martial arts master. Anyway, so he's very literal. He only has one problem. When he's not in control, he can snap and get out of control. But I have two problems. When I'm not in control, I can snap and get out of control. But when I'm not under control, I can get out of control, because fundamentally I lack discipline. And that's what makes me alcoholic, is I can't take one. You know, if you and I are crossing the railroad track, I can swear to God, it ain't going to be the caboose that's going to kill me. It's going to be the engine if we get run over. It's going to be the first car every time. And that was my experience. And so I went from Glendora to East Hollywood and then back when I got the call, and I was I remember trying to muscle this dresser, and I was trying to put it in my car, and hell, you know, leave it there. And then I was I had this kerosene lamp with no blatant regard for anybody. I was pouring the oil out on the street, and then I got in my car and I was leaving, and here was this one policeman over there going like this. You know, I was pulling onto the highway without my lights on, and I'm like, I know I don't have my lights on because I'm trying to evade one more domestic dispute where I'm the one going to jail again. So he's like going like this with the light, you know. Anyway, and so I pull the car over off the street onto this onto this parking lot, into this real estate company. Strange, because it was actually across the street from my house. Anyway, so the nosy cop comes over there after he was done with his other person, and he comes over there and he goes, how you doing? And then I go, and I looked up and I was like, hey, Officer Strange, how are you doing? And he's like, do we know each other? I don't even know why I was trying to call him by his surname. Anyway, I'm like, oh boy, here we go. Anyway, so he gets out, and I'm, you know, the trunk was bobbing, and I was trying to situate everything in my trunk, and he goes, hey, I smell booze. And I go, well, yeah, I've been drinking. And then I was like, who the hell said that? You know what I mean? Whoa, check yourself, right? So then he goes, oh, I like you. You're honest. And then he goes, you won't mind if I administer a sobriety test to you? And my head said, yippee, maybe we're going to pull this one off. We've never done this one before. And he started telling me, do this and do that and do this and that. And here comes another nosy cop, you know, and he has this device, and now they're both tag teaming me, telling me, you're going to have to blow. I'm like, I always had a God in my understanding. He was my Bush League pinch hitter. He was the father of the fatherless. And it was always like, what have you done for me lately? You do this, I'll do that. You know what I mean? And I would be like, hey, you handle this. No, can you get me out of this one? You know, but I remember that day. I say, hey, guys. The still small voice, I said, hey, God, please don't let anything happen to me you're not willing to help me with. And then I say, hey, guys, hey, look. I said, I'm willing to comply with whatever you're telling me to do, but you have to understand, I'm a heavy smoker. And I was like, they were blow. And and the thing didn't read. And then he's like, let's give it to her again. And the other guy goes, no, she's all right. And then let's give it to her again. Now I'm a bystander, and they're going back and forth. And I'm like, hey, guys, you know, anyway. And then the other guy leaves with the device, and then me and his name wasn't Officer Strange. His name was Officer Strong. And he was like around 5 inches taller than me. His chest was out to here, and I was like, Strange, Strong, that's kind of close, Anyway, Officer Strong, he said, Tina, I'm going to let you go. And I felt like begging him, please save me from myself, and take me with you. And then he was going to leave. And then I knocked on the window and I said, Officer Strong, you have my license in your lapel. And then he's like, Tina, I need to make sure you're going to be okay. I had no clue from that time to this time until the rest of my life that I was never going to take another drink. I was only willing to become willing. God knew the way. And that's the way it is for me with the steps. That's the way it is when God reveals who I am to me, And so I remember being invited to a woman's meeting. The officer, he said, look, this is the deal. Do not move that car. And I'm like, okay, and he went out of his way for me. Because he really went out of his way for me. And so, it was just happenstance. It's funny that you guys, Mark's got all four corners covered in here today, I noticed there were 3 new Marks, and then there was another Mark. There was another Mark. Anyway, they were, I went to this meeting at the Shakers, and it was a woman's meeting, and they were all laughing, and I was the only one crying, and they were reading The Family After. And there was one line, and it broke me, and it said, the children were expressing cordial hatred. And my children, I knew, because I knew how much they loved me, and I knew the fact that they probably hated the fact that they loved me that much, being that they didn't know what was wrong with me, And so my children were like, go away, don't, Anyway, when they were reading that, and they were all laughing, and I was the only one crying, I said, that was the first time I said I'm alcoholic. It was at the Shakers in Glendale. And you should have seen, like, 3 ladies flew off their chair. One of them came over and said, oh, my God, we're going to have to put this little guardian angel pin on you. And I'm like, look, you girls are making me nervous. I go, look, we'll do it your way. If it doesn't work, you'll refund me my misery, and I'll be on my way. And you know what? I've done it their way, and God doesn't make too hard of terms of it, you know what I mean? I've always known I'm alcoholic and my life's unmanageable. My life's always been unmanageable, but I've always had a power greater than myself. Even if it's just good orderly direction, gift of desperation, group of drunks, you know what I mean? This is a power greater than me, you know what I mean? If I come in here once a week or however, and tell you what's going on in the back room and take these suggestions off the wall and apply them into my life, I don't know how. It's just, it's fabulous. It is. I don't even have I was 8 years sober when I realized that, that step two was working in my life. You know why? Because when the obsession to drink is left, I didn't know what sanity was. I had to look that up in the dictionary. Sound mind. I said, ooh, I don't know if that's what I want. If this thing ever shuts up, I'm never going to be entertained again, And so I just went through with the rest of it. And you know what? I found my niche in Alcoholics Anonymous. It was the strangest thing. I was invited to an H&I panel. And I went with courage, because I had a lot of fear. And I went back to the insane asylum where I was raised as a child. And I sat down in the seat. And when my butt hit the chair, I felt like I had come home. And that was my niche in Alcoholics Anonymous. And I like to give it away. Thank you. I like to give it away because I can keep it, That's one way I can keep it. I have assurance. Insurance? Assurance? One or the other. Anyway, I went to a men's prison for 18 years. I went to the Hotel California for 18 years, the first Wednesday of the month. And you know what? That worked for me. It might not work for every little bitty you might meet, but it worked for me. And by the way, I was only like 30-some years old, and this was my friend's idea. He did 3 terms in that prison, and he wanted to bring a pretty young girl with him to the prison. And I was like kind of fearless, so I would show up, and then my poor friend, he passed away with 13 years, 2 months, and 9 days sober. And I kept doing his panel. And in my opinion, there's nothing better than watching a baby being born and I'm not the one having it than to see somebody come out from a prison and like, or an institution or insane asylum, and they tap you on the shoulder and they're like, hey, do you remember me? And I'm like, don't come at me like that. Who are you? You know what I mean? And then they're like, I met you at CRC. And I'm like, oh, damn, you look different when you're not wearing all blue. And they're like, hey, I got this. I got a little baby. I have a wife, and my wife is gonna have another baby. I love Alcoholics Anonymous, and you know what? I would have missed it. I would have missed the whole thing. And how do I want to end? COVID locked us out of CRC. They're going to close CRC in maybe a few days from now. So my sobriety has changed, I mean, people who do H&I, you want to get high in Alcoholics Anonymous? Honestly, you want to get high in Alcoholics Anonymous? Do H&I. Do H&I. Go in where somebody can't come out and give them a message of hope. You know what I mean? Tell them where you got it. Tell them where they can get it. And then I read this thing in a book once. It said, moments are like butterflies. They're spectacular emergencies of life. And these moments that I have spent with you today are spectacular emergencies of my life. And I appreciate you. Thank you so much.